Hello and welcome to those of you who are here live and to those of you who are watching on the replay. Today, we are looking at how to get ready, and I put in brackets for your first triathlon. It's not strictly sort of limited to that, but that's the main context. But I'll talk more about that as we go. Um, so just a reminder of what we've got coming up this month. First of all, in terms of the rest of this month, you've got your Q&A next week on Thursday at 7. And then we've got your masterclass review where we'll be looking at both the foundation session that we did on women's training and all the things to kind of take into account as a woman in your training, and also any questions coming out of today. So getting ready for your first triathlon. In terms of what we'll look at today, we're going to look at how to put together a race plan. We're going to look at some questions and issues around kit. We'll be looking at nutrition. We'll be looking at how to get race ready. I haven't updated that slide since I moved nutrition up. But anyway, we'll be looking at the kind of prep as we get closer to race day. And we'll be looking at mindset. Now, in terms of who this is for anybody who's doing their first triathlon, anybody who's doing their first-ish triathlon, i.e. you've done one or two before, but it still feels fairly new. Anybody who's picking up the distance, so you've got a bit more to think about. It's mostly focused on triathlon because there's more to think about in terms of triathlon, but it's certainly, especially when we're talking race planning and when we're talking nutrition and things like that, it's also relevant for those of you who've got half marathons and marathons coming up. So first question, if you're starting to get closer to race day and starting to get those race day nerves and starting to wonder, eek, can I do it? Then my answer is very definitely yes. Obviously, there's a million different factors that affect that, but so long as you go through the steps that we're talking about here and your training, I'm not particularly talking training today. We obviously covered that right at the beginning of the month, at the beginning of the year. But if you do all of that, then yes, you can. But in terms of making it feel something more manageable, something less scary, number one is practice. Practice anything that you're getting worried about. That's the training. But for those of you who are worrying about transition and things, when people first start doing triathlon, they put so much emphasis onto transition and worrying about that. So practice it. And I'll talk about how you can do that. But anything we practice, it starts to make it easier. Anything you're worried about, whether that's something like transition, whether that's about descending, on steeper hills and things, open water swimming, whatever it is, start with something that's easier and build up from there. If we go in at the deep end, literally, then we put ourselves into a state of fear and we can't learn in that state and we just get more and more worried. So start with baby steps and build up from that. Anything that you're finding too overwhelming, break it down. So break it down in terms of the practicalities, how you go about training for it, but break it down in your mind as well. We'll talk more about mindset as we go on. But my over kind of riding question for you, for anything that you're worrying about in terms of racing, ask yourself what you're actually scared of. So often we get stuck into this mindset of, I can't do it, I can't do it, I can't do it. Ask what it means. When you say, I can't do it, what do you literally mean? Do you literally think you can't get to the end of the race? Or is it that you think you won't be able to do it in a time that you think is a reputable time, a good time? If that's the case, do you have any idea what you've based that on? Or is it a number that you've kind of come up with based on, why have you put that number there? If it's just worrying about, you're going to forget your kit or something, it's not going to be the end of the world. And you can have a really simple process of having a kit list, which I'll go through with you, that's going to help reduce the chance of that happening anyway. So try and come out of that just fear state where we get stuck in this, I can't do it, and ask yourself what you're scared of and what you can do about it. And that will start to break things down quite quickly and it will become less scary. But we'll go into more detail as we go. So I am a big fan of planning for your race, making sure you have a plan of what you plan to do on race day. Now, there's lots of reasons for that. First of all, if it's your first time, then it means that it starts to break down that overwhelm, and it means that you start to actually think through those chunks. So rather than it becoming this big overwhelming thing, you're starting to break it down and know what you've got to do. And so it's particularly important if you're doing either your first time racing or your first time at a new distance. If you're getting scared of picking up the distance for a longer distance or a different type of format, then having a plan is going to help you go into it prepared and feeling less overwhelmed. It's also really important to have a plan if you're going for some sort of stretch goal. So if you're trying to qualify for age group, or if you're trying to get a certain time and that time really matters to you, then planning is going to mean that you're much more likely to hit that goal. A plan becomes more important the longer the distance is, just because there's more for us to think about. There's more that could go wrong. So having a plan is going to help us be more prepared for that. And having a plan is really important if you're getting those race day nerves, because it means you can stop worrying about things and instead start planning for them. So rather than just having something that goes round and round in your head, I'm worried about kit, I'm worried about kit. Okay, let's practice our kit and make sure that it works okay for us. So it can help to break down the unknown. And it also just means we've got a step-by-step process to go to. So we can come back to that process rather than getting stuck in that spiraling. In terms of what we want to include in our plan, I would say, and again, this becomes more important the longer distance it is, or if you're in particularly challenging conditions or something, but a plan for your nutrition, for your hydration, for your kit, for your pacing, for your mindset. And then that plan needs to potentially be adapted based on the weather and your menstrual cycle. So that's what we're going to look at today. Now, with all of your plan, I recommend that you are practicing this in training. And again, the longer the race is, the more important it is to spend more time working out your plan. If it's a shorter race, then you just need to do sort of one or two sort of test goes of it. But have that plan of all those different elements, try it out in training, evaluate how it goes, then refine your plan, update your plan, actually commit to it, because it's very easy to say, for example, in terms of fueling, oh, I think I should have some more gels next time. But you haven't actually decided how many gels, you haven't decided how often you're going to take them, which means then when you go out, you forget to take them with you, you forget to make sure you've got them in stock, or you carry them, but you're not really sure when you're trying to take them. So you need to have that thing of, okay, what do I want to do differently next time? Commit to yourself what that looks like. I would write it down, and then that makes it more kind of real for you. Test it out in training, and then you go back into that circle. Next training session, you evaluate, you refine, you update your plan, you commit, you test it. Again, if you're doing a relatively short race, once or twice is fine. If you're doing a longer race, then this should be an ongoing process that you're going through as you come closer to race day. So in terms of kit, some things to think about in terms of kit. First of all, if you are doing anything involving running, check your shoes, your trainers, check how long you've had them for, look for obvious signs of wear, but also if you've got a record of how long you've been running in them for, check how long you've already done in them. Trainers, and it's really personal to you and it's personal to the trainers, but last for about 500k. If you are going to go over that in the lifetime of this training plan up to your race, don't leave it until the trainers kind of hit that 500k or start getting worn out to replace them. Replace them or get a new pair early on. You can have two pairs of trainers in use at the same time, but it always takes longer to get a new pair of trainers than you think. You go to buy them and it turns out they don't stock them anymore, or whatever. There's issues in terms of the logistics of buying them, or you just don't get round to it. When you buy them, maybe the manufacturer's changed the shoe since you last bought it. They might not even, that might not be obvious to you, but they might have had an upgrade, or even just the fact that you've worn in the old pair of shoes means it's going to be worn to your foot. And so when you get a new pair, it's not worn to your foot anymore. And if we use a shoe in a different way to how we've been using it previously, we risk injury, particularly if you're actually changing shoes for some reason. Then again, we're risking injury if we go in when we're doing big volume. So you want to be using those shoes when you're doing relatively short runs, which happen at the beginning of your training plan and don't happen so much at the end of the plan. So get them early and then just have them alternating with your existing pair of shoes, have them as a pair to wear when it gets muddy, whatever, but get them early rather than waiting too late. If you're doing your first triathlon, don't spend loads of money. It's really easy to get carried away with the kit and worry that you need this, that, and the other, and you want it to all look lovely and matching and everything, but you don't know if you're going to do another one. Chances are you will, but you don't want to spend a load of money without knowing when you're going to do your next race or what that next race will be and what you would need for that race. So beg, borrow, don't steal stuff. Make sure you've got what you need, but don't spend loads of money. Remember, training is far more important than your kit. So we can put all this kind of effort and worry into kit, but it's the training that makes the difference. Whatever you're using, make sure you've practiced it with it before race day to make sure that it fits, to make sure it works for you. And if it's something, technical like aero bars on your bike or something, the more times you use them, the more you get used to using them, the better you're going to use them on race day. And please, 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 going back to that idea of don't spend loads of money on your kit, don't start freaking out by what other people have got. It's so easy to turn up to a race and go, oh my God, they had this, they had that. I remember I had a client who was absolutely amazing, brilliant results, but she would get freaked out by people's plaits. She'd just be like, oh my God, they all had these tiny, tiny plaits, and she just had short hair, and she'd get so freaked out by everybody else. You cannot judge how somebody is going to do based on what they are wearing, what they look like. So you be comfortable in what you're doing. Don't worry about other people. In terms of the swim, so common questions that come up, can you get changed when you come out of the swim? Normally, originally, no. That's changing. There's a lot of lobbying going on, particularly from groups that work with women, groups that work with ethnic minorities, that that may want to be more covered up in the swim. So it's increasingly common that you will get a changing tent at a race, but ask if you want one and they don't have one. Do a bit of campaigning to get one. But if not, yeah, do ask. Don't presume that you'll be able to get changed. In most cases, you won't. So in most cases, you want something that you can wear for the swim, you can wear for the bike, and you can wear for the run. And that means it needs to be tight enough that on the swim, it's not going to be flapping around all over the place. On the bike, it's got enough padding that you're not going to be, hurting your soft tissue sitting on the saddle. And then when you get on the run, that you don't feel like you're running in a nappy. So that commonly is a tri-suit, because a tri-suit is tight fitting. You can cycle in it. It's got light padding on the shorts, and then it's but light enough padding that you're not going to be really kind of sweaty bum when you're running in it. But you don't have to have a tri-suit. So it could be that you have a tight fitting top and a pair of tight fitting shorts. And so long as, if it was a relatively short race, so long as you're comfortable cycling for 5 or 10, 20K, whatever, without padding, then that might be fine for you. So think through your options. I would avoid probably wearing a swimsuit underneath your shorts, just because a swimsuit can chafe quite a lot when you're running in it. But practice, whatever you're planning on wearing, practice it, check it works for you. If it feels comfortable, then you're good. The only rules is you can't get naked in transition, so no nudity in transition. Some races are a bit fussy. You can't just have a bra top on, so you might not be able to take off one top and put on another. That will depend on the race. Don't worry about being wet on the bike. You are allowed to have a very small towel in transition. Rules have just changed this year in the UK that we have to have a smaller towel than we were allowed previously, more like a flannel. But you don't need to worry about being wet on the bike, because you're going to dry off from the wind as you go, and you're going to be getting sweaty anyway. So you might want to just dry your feet before you put your socks on, but I wouldn't worry beyond that. I wouldn't be wearing underwear as in pants. I wouldn't wear underwear. I wouldn't wear pants underneath cycle shorts or tri shorts anyway. But and I would definitely recommend, for most women, we're wearing a sports bra that's going to support us. We can take a mile off a marathon by having a well-fitted sports bra. Even if we're not doing a marathon, we still want that support. So wear something that you're comfortable underneath whatever else it is you're choosing to wear. If it's an open water swim, then you're probably going to want a wetsuit. Check the rules. If it's particularly cold, you have to have a wetsuit. If it's particularly hot, you might not be allowed a wetsuit. It's different temperatures for different age groups, for different situations. So check the rules. But most open water races in the UK, you'll probably be wearing a wetsuit unless it's very, very hot. You want a swim wetsuit. A surf wetsuit is very hard to swim in. It's not designed for being sort of streamlined in the water. So you want a wetsuit, but you can hire them, you can borrow them. So definitely look into those options. If you're buying your first wetsuit, spend some time on finding one that fits you. Either go to somewhere that sells them, or buy a load online, but you really want to try lots and lots of different shapes and sizes. Different companies have a different shape. Whenever you're buying clothes, you know that, but particularly in terms of wetsuit, it's important that it fits. It should feel almost too tight. You need to be able to breathe. That's absolutely key, obviously, but it should feel hard work to get it on. You want to put it on, and you want to make sure you pull it all the way up, so kind of inch it up your legs. Make sure you've got gloves on or something so you don't put your fingers through the neoprene, pulling it all the way up, particularly making sure you've got space around your chest to breathe. If it's cold, then you might want to consider wearing a base layer over whatever you're wearing for the rest of the race. So you put on your normal clothes, then put a base layer over that you're just going to take off when you come out of the water. You might want to consider an extra hat. Generally, for most races, unless it's something particular, you're not allowed to wear the gloves or the booties. So you can use them in training, obviously, but don't rely on being able to wear them on race day. I would definitely recommend having some lube. So particularly down the back of your neck, if you're sighting a lot and moving your head around, you often get very kind of chafed around the back of your neck, particularly in seawater, just A, because you're looking up more because of the waves, but B, because the salt chafes it. And I'd recommend some dark goggles or polarized goggles, particularly for if you're going to be doing an early morning start, because often the sun's very low and it's really hard to see where you're going. So you want some sort of filter in the goggles so that you can see where you're going. If you can, please try and practice in open water, partly so you get rid of the fear, partly so that you practice your skills. So something like sighting, where you're practicing looking up not as you breathe, but as you're swimming to see where you're going, makes it a lot easier. So just, if you can, get in a few practices in open water before your race so that you're more familiar with it. And practice getting into the water if you think you'll have to in race day. Most races start in the water, some will start out of the water. So practice your entrance to the water if the race will start on dry land. Practice your exit, so coming up and coming out of the water, and particularly just taking off that wetsuit. Practice taking off the wetsuit, particularly when your hands are cold and you can't do anything when the adrenaline's going. So doing it efficiently. You are allowed to breaststroke in open water and in a pool swim. So you can always mix between the two. So if you're stressing about not being able to swim all the way, or stressing that you just kind of can't see where you're going and stuff, you can do breaststroke. In a pool swim, you can stop at the end. Just make sure you're aware of other people coming past. Normally people will tap you on your foot if they want to get past you. And check the rules on tumble turns. In terms of your bike, and those of you who are here live, if you've got any questions, feel free. I've got the chat open, so you can pop in questions into the chat or just ask as we go through. In terms of your bike, I would really, really recommend, especially if you're newer to the sport, to choose comfort over speed. So if you're getting a bike fit, I would definitely recommend getting a bike fit so that you're comfortable on your bike. But make sure you tell whoever's doing the bike fit that you want to make sure you're comfortable. It's not just about being as aero as you could possibly be. Generally, there's a compromise. Aero means you go faster, but it's not so comfortable. And you definitely don't go faster if you feel so uncomfortable that you can't kind of hold that position. So make sure that you're comfortable with how the bike fits you and any kit that you're using. We kind of talked shorts already, but just to reiterate, if it's a short race, you might be fine with no padding at all. You might just want some tight fitting run shorts. Tight fitting because then they're okay in the water. If it's a longer race, then you probably want some more padding. Tri shorts give you a bit of padding, bike shorts give you more padding. For something like an Ironman, I'll tend to get changed. You do normally get a changing tent at an Ironman, and I'll tend to either get changed out of what I'm wearing and put on some bike shorts, or I wear my bike shorts on the swim and take them off and put run shorts on for the run. Or you could often, you might even think about putting some cycle shorts on top of your other shorts. Think about whether you want a tri-suit or you want a two-piece. If you know that you're going to need to go to the toilet mid-race, you might find it easier to have a tri-top and shorts separately, just to make it easier to go to the toilet. Make sure that you've got your bike serviced. Don't leave it to the last minute. If you know how to serve it yourself, obviously do it yourself, but otherwise make sure you get it booked in to check for any issues, and so that you've got that confidence it's good to go. Make sure you check your tyres to make sure there's not too much damage to the tyres, so you're less likely to get a puncture on race day. Make sure you carry a puncture repair kit in your training as well as your racing. Even if you don't know how to use it, if you need somebody to help you, they're going to be a lot more able and more willing to help you if you've actually got the kit for them to help you with. So make sure you're carrying that puncture repair kit, but ideally learn how to use it. Have a look at a GCN video or something in terms of how to change a puncture. If you're running tubeless, ditto, make sure you're carrying the right equipment for that. Only use kit that you're confident with. So lots of people go, oh God, I've got a race coming up. I'll need to wear my cleats. If you're not comfortable in cleats, then don't wear cleats. You're not going to, it's not going to help you if you're not confident. And you could say in some ways you save time if you're wearing your trainers, because you don't have to change your shoes between the bike and the run. So if you want to use cleats, go for it. I'm a big fan of cleats, but make sure you're confident with them. Make sure you're practicing for race day conditions. So if it's a hilly race, make sure you're practicing for hilly races. If it's a flat race, practice trying to get into that aero position, getting down on the drops, trying to make your frontal profile as small as possible so you go through the wind easier. Practice at the pace that you plan to race at. In terms of socks, lots of people think, oh, I shouldn't wear socks on race day. If you've always worn socks in training, wear socks on race day. If you plan to not wear socks, practice without it. You will not save yourself the seconds or so that it takes to put socks on if you get a blister. So check what's going to work the best for you, and be aware of the likely weather. If it's likely to be windy, know how to get yourself down more aero out of the wind, know how to control the bike in the wind. If it's likely to be wet, know how to control your pacing, particularly in and out of corners, so that you're not sliding around. So I was going to say, know your likely weather. Obviously these days anything's possible, but make sure you've trained for those different conditions. A few other things on kit. So you don't have to have a tri belt, but I definitely recommend having a tri belt. So a tri belt's just a kind of elasticated belt with a buckle at the front, and it means you can attach your number. For a triathlon, you want to have your race number at the front when you're running, your race number at the back when you're cycling. In the olden days, they used to give you 2 race numbers. Now that's very rare. So if you don't want to have to stop and repin a number mid-race, then a tri belt or just a bit of elastic that you can swivel round. Tri-laces are just elastic laces in your shoes, which make it much easier to take the shoe on and off. If you're doing a long distance race, I wouldn't worry about it. Transition's a tiny proportion of your race time. If you're doing a shorter distance, it's a good idea too, because it just means you can slide that shoe on and off without having to worry about fumbling around doing up your shoes. You would be surprised how complicated doing up your shoes is when you've got all that adrenaline running. You want a towel just to put down at your area. But as I say, the rules have changed this year, so that towel's a lot smaller than it used to be, and you can't use it to kind of mark your territory. If it's likely to be hot on race day, sun cream, putting it on beforehand and waterproof sun cream, and then reapplying it if you need to on a longer race, or certainly having some in transition if you think you need it. Wetsuit lube I already talked about, particularly around the neck, but you can also put it around the ankles and the wrists to make your wetsuit come off easier. Talc in your socks and in your shoes, just putting it in beforehand can be really useful just to help them go on more easily. And if you're planning to use your watch, make sure you're happy using it in whatever mode you plan to use it in. So if you plan to use it in triathlon mode, practice with that in training, do a brick session and just pretend to do the swim beforehand. Know if you want the transitions included or not. Normally you can turn them on or turn them off. If you're doing a long distance race and you plan to use your watch, are you sure that your watch will last for the whole distance? There is a kit list on my website. If you go to my website /freebies, there's a whole load of race resources on there, but there's a kit list on there, which has been added to by clients over the years. So it's pretty comprehensive. I would definitely recommend printing that off and just having a look through it. Check you've got everything you intend to. Some things on there are optional, but check you've got everything. And then I would use that when you are packing for the race. So in terms of nutrition, you've heard me say it a million times before, but we need to fuel if we're doing something over 60 to 90 minutes. We're going to burn through the stored carbohydrates, so we want to take something on. If you are doing a relatively short race, a sprint or something, then you might want to have a gel, but you don't need to stress too much about it. As your distances get longer, you certainly want to be thinking more about your fueling. You want to test what works for you. You want to build it up in training. Ideally, we want to be aiming for up to 60 grams an hour. For a lot of women, that's too high. In theory, we can go up to 120 grams an hour, but that I don't know anybody who can get up to that. But you want to be testing your ability to take on as much carbohydrate as you can to make it easier for your body to do what it needs to do by having more fuel on board. So the longer the race is, the more important that becomes, but also the harder it becomes because you're taking on more and more energy as you go. Consider, do you want to be using gels? Do you want to be using liquids? You can get, energy drinks in your bottle or just maltodextrose or something to put into your bottle. In terms of solids, you've got your cubes, like your Cliff Blocks. I just use jelly, the kind of stuff that you dissolve into water to make, a kid's jelly. There's more and more products that are kind of like a Kendall mint cake, Zoom. Letters like that, but not those letters. I can't think what it's called. A new one that's in the UK now, but there's lots of different options. If you don't like gels, check that that's not something that's kind of changed now. Lots of people used gel 10 years ago. They were awful 10 years ago. They have got better. So do try them again. Try different makes. You get lots of discounts through the membership for different sports gels. But if you don't like gels, think about using blocks or something. It wants to be something simple that your body can cope with. You don't want to be eating a whole sandwich. You want something that's easy for your body to digest so you can carry on running afterwards. Think about hydration as well. Most races, or particularly triathlon races, are going to supply water out on the course for you. You might want to have your own. You'll probably have your own bottle on your bike as well. But think about electrolytes. So especially if you're likely to be sweating, either because it's early season and you're wearing lots of layers, or later in the season, if you're going to be sweating, think about electrolytes. That can either be the ones that you just drop into your bottle and they dissolve in your bottle. So you might have that on your bike. But if you're doing a long race, running race, you might want to think about the ones that you can just swallow. So tablets that you swallow. So you just have that with your water and just keep them in your pocket. Whatever you're doing in terms of your fueling and your hydration, think about the logistics. So how are you going to carry it? There's no point in saying, I'm going to have 3 gels an hour, but you haven't got anywhere to put those gels. So think about how you're going to carry them, whether you're going to wear a hydration vest, whether you've got a bum bag, whether you're going to rely on the on-course support, whatever you plan to do, just think through the logistics of it. We want to make sure that we train our gut. So as I say, we've got this theoretical capacity to take on 120 grams of carbs an hour, but we have to train our body to do that. So every long session, think about building that training in. This is for those of you doing longer distance racing, anything over kind of 2 hours, 3 hours plus. So every long session, make it a session that is about training the gut. That is testing your race plan, seeing how much energy you can get in, and making sure that you cope all right with it. Make sure you fuel through to the end of the session. We'll often have that thing in our head of, oh, I'm nearly home. Yeah, now I won't bother having that last gel. It's the last gel that's the hardest for your body to absorb. So you want to kind of force those adaptations. So you do want to keep fueling through to the end, but also think about that last gel being kickstarting your recovery. Your recovery starts the minute you stop moving. And if you haven't got energy on board, your body can't be rebuilding itself. So you need that energy, you need protein as well, but you need energy to rebuild. So think about that last gel when you're not sure if you need it at the end as kickstarting your recovery. Make sure you're practicing fueling at your race pace. So often you might have a training plan where you'll be doing race pace easy, race pace easy. Don't just use those easy breaks to take on your nutrition, because if you're not planning on an easy break in race day, then that won't be there. So you want to make sure, in terms of the practicalities, can you breathe and eat the food, the gel, whatever, at the same time, but also is your body happy digesting it when you're at that intensity? And bear in mind, for those of you doing triathlon, especially those longer triathlons, that it's easier to take on energy when you're cycling than when you're running. When you're running, there's all that impact of your feet and there's nowhere to sort of store your food and everything. Whereas when you're on the bike, I definitely recommend getting a top tube bag, have your food, fuel in that top tube bag, have it pre-opened, and then you just take it out and eat it as you go. Logistically, it's easier, but also you're not having that impact of your stomach. If you're doing a longer distance race, then I would recommend you have some solid fuel at the beginning on the bike. And then as you get towards the end of the bike session, you come off that solid fuel and you move on to your gels or your cubes or your jelly or whatever you choose to use, so that you haven't got undigested food in your stomach when you go onto the run. And then once you're on the run, I would keep it those more sports nutrition products, just because, again, you don't want that undigested food in your stomach when you're running. Think through what you're going to have pre-race, especially if you're going to travel for the race. Do you have the facilities to make your own breakfast or whatever? If not, then thinking what's really simple that you'll be able to do wherever you're going to be staying, and use that in your training. So you know what agrees with you know what's going to sit well in your stomach, and you know how far in advance of training, of racing, you need to consume it. During, as I say, you might be using gels. You could be baby food can work quite well. Try and find one that's, high carbohydrate that you like the flavor of, but that can work. It could be fruit, dried fruit. It could be your blots, your jellies, your Haribo, what do you call them? Flapjack. Or if you don't like oats, then your Kellogg's Squares bars or something similar to that, or your energy drinks. If you're using sports products, then in theory, you want to check that it's got the Informed Sport logo. If it hasn't, it could be cut with a product that's illegal in racing. So if there's a chance you will get tested, so if you think that you might be coming, near the top of your age group, winning your age group, you might get tested at the end. You really want to make sure that your product hasn't been cut with anything. If you're likely to be lower down in the finishing positions, not such a risk. Obviously, you shouldn't be doping, but it's not intentional. But if you want to be absolutely sure that it's not been cut with anything, then you want to be having that Informed Sport logo. So again, have that nutrition plan, particularly if it's a longer distance race. You really want to be checking, and this is marathon as well as triathlon. Have that nutrition plan, test it, evaluate it, refine it, update your plan, commit to those changes, keep on working through that cycle. Think, how would you change it depending on the weather? So if it was really hot, generally we absorb less energy, or our stomach's more sensitive, so we don't want to take on so much if it's hot. So you might need to just cut back on the carbs if it's hot, but you might need to increase the electrolytes and the hydration. If it's cold, you might be, struggling to, if you're wearing gloves, it's harder to take on nutrition. You might not drink so much. If your energy is in your bottle, that might be a problem if it's cold. So think through those implications. Also think through if you were on your period or the part of your menstrual cycle where you most struggle. If you suffer with things like bloating and stomach cramps, do you know how those different products affect you? So knowing how you might need to adapt your training plan or your nutrition plan based on where you are in your menstrual cycle. There is a worksheet in the membership, which will take you through answering all these questions to draft your own plan. Then as we get closer to race day, we want to start being a bit more race specific in our training. So things like, we want to practice our pacing. So knowing what pace we plan to race at. It's very common to go out too fast and then get slower. which not only is going to make you slower overall, because if we go too fast and then slow, that's less efficient than if we just held a steady pace all the way through. But it's also really depressing when you see everybody start overtaking you. So far better to pace yourself, especially coming out on the bike. Remember, what you do on the bike is going to affect the run. So if you go too hard on the bike, you will be slower on the run. It's really hard to hold back when everybody else is overtaking you. But if you then end up overtaking them at the end of the race, that's going to be a better result. Practice for the conditions you're likely to experience on race day. So if it's an open water swim, practice open water. If it's a technical bike course, practice your bike handling. If it's a off-road trail run, then practice running off-road, practicing your kit, practicing your skills, practicing all of those different things in those conditions. As you get closer to race day, adding in some brick sessions. So your brick session is where you do the run after the bike. I don't tend to do the swim as part of a brick just because it's a faff to have somewhere where it's secure to have locked up your bike that you can come straight out of the swim, go out on the bike. If you can make that work logistically for you, go for it. But the biggest issue is normally that transition from the bike because your legs are already tired when you're out on the run. So that's the one you want to practice. It's not that it actually gives you different training adaptations. It's just getting your head used to what that feels like and getting used to that kind of jelly leg feeling. And knowing how to update your pacing, because you're not going to run at the same speed, or if you go too hard on the bike, you're going to struggle to run. So it helps you work out what your appropriate pacing is. Practice transition. I'll talk through that in a bit more detail in a second. If it's likely to be hot on race day, then practice for the heat. So as I say, that might just mean that you need to adapt your kit, adapt your fueling, adapt your hydration strategy, or it might mean you actually want to do heat training. So for example, those of you doing the London Marathon, last year was a heat wave on race day and really affected a lot of people. So you might want to add in heat training. I won't go through a specific heat protocol here. If you want to know, drop a question for the Q&A next week. But basically, you're either going to do sessions if you have a turbo trainer on the turbo trainer, wearing every clothes that you wear without having a fan on or anything. It's harder to do it this time of year because it's not that hot. I had to do it in the run up to Kona when it wasn't that hot. So I was literally wearing everything I own on the turbo. So you're deliberately getting your body temperature higher. Or you can do sauna sessions, sauna or steam sessions, where again, you're getting your body comfortable at a higher temperature so it starts to adapt. So I won't go into more detail, but do shout if you want more detail on that. I would recommend building in some race simulation sessions. So I talked about these when I talked you through how to write your training plan, but in the run up to race day, your longest sessions prior to race day, turn them into race simulations. So use the kit that you plan to use on race day, use the nutrition you plan to use on race day, as well as the hydration, practice that pacing, make sure it's realistic, put it all together. So it's like a dry run, dress rehearsal for race day. And then make sure you have that taper. Do not be tempted to cram in extra training in that taper in the run up to race day. You want to go into race day feeling fresh. There's lots of rules for tapering or lots of suggestions, but I would recommend 2 weeks out, you're going down to about 75% of your normal volume. And then race week, you're going down to about 50% of your normal volume. So that could mean that every session is half as long, or it could mean you do half as many sessions, splitting it across the different disciplines. But the main goal is to go in feeling fresh. So in terms of transition, there is a video on my website. So I'm not going to talk it through in loads of detail. It's a really short video that just talks you through how to do transition. I'd really, really recommend finding a car park or a bit of space somewhere in a park or something, setting up your bike, setting up your transition spot and practicing it. So do a few loops round where you practice getting on and off your bike, you practice setting up your kit and everything in the way that you plan to use it. Set it up in order that you'll use it. So with your helmet closest to you, your run stuff furthest away from you. If you're not planning on using cleats, then it'll be the same pair of shoes. If you're planning on using cleats, then you've obviously got your bike shoes and your run shoes. If you want to do the whole flying mount, then you should be practicing it by now, and you should be doing it every week so that you're confident with it. Flying mount is where you attach the bike shoes to your bike in advance with some elastic bands to keep them in position, and you jump onto your bike and then you start pedaling and you put your shoes on once you're on your bike. If you're not planning to do that, don't stress about it. You do not need to do it. I do not do it. I do age group racing and I never do it. And I see all the people who are doing it in age group racing falling off their bike as soon as they get on because they haven't practiced it enough. So don't do it unless you're really, really confident with it. In terms of where you mount and dismount your bike, there will be a mount line on the ground. There'll be a referee standing next to it. So it'll be really clear when you first come and set up your bike in the morning. I'd recommend looking. It won't always be set up yet, but ask around, ask if they can show you where the mount and the dismount line is. Ask them to show you where the swim in, the bike out, the bike in, and the run out all are. So you can see, so you can find your bike from, or your transition spot from all those different positions. But in terms of the mount line, people get confused where you mount and dismount. If you think of transition as an island, you cannot cycle in the island. So as you leave the island transition, you have to be over the mount line before you can start cycling. And then as you're coming back towards transition, you have to be off your bike before you cross that mount line. It's obvious when you think about it, but you panic in the moment. So make sure you just thought it through, visualize it as you're coming into transition, as you're coming out of transition. In terms of rules, so this is from the BTF website. I'm not going to go through it in loads of detail, but just to know, for most races, most triathlon races, you're not allowed to draft. So drafting is where you're cycling directly behind the person in front of you, and you're getting that benefit of them cutting through the wind, so you're not having to work so hard because they're taking the brunt of the wind. In certain, if you're doing age group qualifiers for sprint draft legal racing, you can, but that's a thing in itself. I'm guessing if you're watching this as the first time, that's not what you're doing. So generally, you need to be leaving 12 meters between you and the person in front. It's technically speaking, I think it's from the front of the wheel to the front of their wheel. I wouldn't stress the issue. Just make sure you're holding that gap. Then you've got the rule as to how long you can overtake for. So if you're overtaking somebody, you've got 25 seconds to overtake them. In theory, you need to do that. You can't pull out and then pull back in again when you change your mind. So don't overtake on a hill if you don't think you're going to be able to do it in time. Have a look at the rules and make sure you're happy. You can draft on the swim, so you can be absolutely on somebody's feet on the swim. You can be behind somebody on the run. It's just on the bike that you can't draft, and you also can't draft other vehicles. Other rules to be aware of: it's your responsibility to know the course. The marshals will tell you, but it's your responsibility to know the course. You'll generally have like arrows up on the course as well. It should be easy to follow, but make sure you've had a look at it beforehand. Race numbers, I already said, you need them on the front for the run. You need them on your back for the bike. You generally don't wear them in the swim. So I would have the race number already on the race belt and the race belt done up in transition. So you step into your race belt. That's a lot easier than trying to do it up when you've either got cold hands or all the adrenaline going. You're not allowed, for most races, check the rules again, but you're not allowed headphones. So if you're used to wearing headphones when you're running, get used to not using headphones because you're not allowed them. You're not allowed filming equipment. You're not allowed to be filming or using your phone while you're racing. In terms of your helmet, you need to leave it racked up in transition. When you come up to your bike, the first thing you do is put that helmet on. So if you put your helmet, you'll have seen on the photo before, I have my helmet on top of everything else. So I can't start picking up anything else. The first thing I need to do is put my helmet on before you touch your bike. But if you just put it on first, then you know it's done. When you finish the race, you are not allowed to take off the helmet until you have racked your bike. Drafting, we've talked about. Transition. So the new rule is towels may not be used to mark space, but a small flannel sized towel, no more than 12 inches by 12 inches, may be used. So no idea how big 12 inches is, but anyway, you can work that one out. I think it's about a flannel size. Again, with all of your plan, everything, go through that circle, make sure you're happy with your plan. So on to mindset and race day nerves. So you'll have seen this slide before in the mindset talk, but just to reiterate, your thoughts are not fact. So if you're having thoughts about, I can't do this, I'm not good enough, it's going to be too hard, any of that, those are just opinions. They are not facts and they're not helping you. So I would suggest you work on trying to change them to thoughts that are going to help you better. In terms of dealing with race day nerves, same process we've talked about before. So number one, you want to notice that you're having that unhelpful thought. If you're panicking, if you're getting scared, if you're worrying you can't do it, whatever, notice it. Then pause. It's that pausing that allows us to slow down our brain, to go back into our rational brain rather than our spiraling, freaking out brain. If you can write down your fears, what it is you're worrying about, then that's a really powerful way of breaking them down. If you haven't got time to write them down, then just start thinking them through slowly, keeping your breath nice and controlled with that pause in there. And ask yourself what you're actually scared of. Interrogate your thoughts, remembering they're not facts, that idea we talked about before of taking your thoughts to court. So what is it you're scared of? And generally, it'll be something really silly. I'm scared that I'll forget my socks. Okay, what can we do about that? A, would it be the end of the world? I'm sure somebody will lend you some socks on race day. But B, having a bloody great post-it note on top of your kit bag saying, don't forget my socks, whatever it is. So work out what you're actually scared of and what you can do about it. Often it's we're worried we won't be good enough. Ask yourself what good enough means. What is your definition of it? And is it up to anybody else to define that or just you? If you are happy, you've done the best that you can do on race day, then what does it matter how your time compares to anybody else? If you're finding that you're getting overwhelmed, then think about reducing the pressure on yourself. So we can reframe we can reframe the nerves as excitement or that it's something that's challenging. Think of a kid on Christmas morning, they're all excited. They're not going, oh my God, I'm so scared, I don't want this to happen. They're excited, but it's exactly the same feeling in your body. It just depends what your interpretation of what that means. Ask yourself why you're doing the race. Remind yourself of that reason and keep working towards that rather than worrying about all the other kind of stuff that gets into your mind. Ask yourself whether it really matters how you do. And if it does, why does it matter? Why does that actually matter to you? And maybe doing a bit of work around that. Defining if you've got this, everybody else is going to be better. If I can't do it, define what it is, define who everybody is. So breaking down those terms and check what you actually mean. And then when it gets hard, whether that's in training or whether that's on race day, remembering your why. Why is it you're doing it? Come back to that to motivate yourself to keep going. Think about some different grounding techniques you can use. So you can just count. You can count your steps, count your swim strokes, whatever. You can focus on your technique, whether it's your swim technique, your run technique, your soft, steady pedaling technique, whatever it is. So things that ground you in what you're doing rather than letting that mind spiral. If you want more suggestions on grounding, then we worked a lot on that in the previous Club Feel Fit block, so block 33. And use visualization. Visualization, both of things going well, how that feels, you finishing that race, but also visualize things that might go wrong so that you know how you deal with them. So rather than going, oh my God, I'm so scared I might get a puncture. Okay, if you get a puncture, what are you going to do about it? Visualize working through those steps of how you're going to deal with it. So that is it. In terms of further resources, as I say, on my website, there's the top tips for race day success. So you can download that or sign up to that and you get lots of tips on how to get yourself ready for race day. There's those race day checklists, both a beginner's one and a slightly more detailed one. And there's that video for transition training. So how you can set yourself up to practice transition. In terms of questions that were sent in advance, and Emily, do feel free to pop any questions into the chat and I'll come to those afterwards. So Becca asked how to train for a long climb and descent on the bike and the run and how to practice nutrition. So in terms of that long climb and descent, remember that a hill is no different in terms of our fitness to being on the flat. It's just that we're having to work at a higher percentage. So it's not that a hill in itself is harder to cycle up, but it's asking more from that percentage of fitness we have. So make sure you're using your gears to make it as easy as possible. So whether you're running, cycling, whatever, your goal is never constant pace. Your goal is constant effort. So you want to try and keep your effort smooth, whether you're doing that based on RPE, so perceived effort, whether you're doing that based on heart rate, whether you're doing that based on power, you want to try and keep the effort the same. So as you go up that hill, use those gears, drop your speed, not so slowly you're about to fall off, but as slow as you need to try and keep it as easy as it needs to be. If you try and catch up with everybody else and go faster up the hill, you are going deeper into those reserves. You're working harder and harder, which is going to make you slower overall. So that's your first thing, trying to keep your pacing, your effort steady. Think about training on the conditions that you're going to be using. So you might not be able to do as kind of hard as the race is going to be, but certainly finding local hills near you and practice on those. So practice your technique for going up the hill, engaging your core, thinking about pushing straight down into the pedal, trying to stay seated for as long as possible, come out of the saddle for breaks. But when you're coming out of the saddle, you're having to use loads more of your body, support yourself up on the bike. So as much as possible, trying to stay seated and just have some breaks where you come out the saddle when you need it. In terms of descending, make sure you're getting down onto your drops. If you're not confident on descending, pop a question in. I can answer in more detail in the Q&A next week. But for descending, we want to be getting down onto our drops. It lowers our center of gravity. So we've got more control over the bike and we've got better control over the brakes because we're going like that rather than that. It's much stronger like that than like that. And you want to be thinking about your foot position. So as your core, well, so you want to be thinking about your cornering first of all. As you come into a corner, only taking as much speed into a corner as you are confident to take through. Thinking about looking towards the exit of the corner. So don't look at the, oh my God, I'm scared, I'm going to go over the edge or into the wall or whatever there. Look around the corner to where you want to exit it. And think about having your outside foot down. Again, if you want more detail on descending and cornering and stuff, pop a question through to the Q&A. And then in terms of practicing nutrition, I think I've covered within today. I don't think it was specific to the hill climbing, but do bear in mind, if you're doing a really hilly race, are you confident eating on the bike when you're going uphill or downhill or whatever? So I prefer eating when I go uphill because I'm going slower. It means I can get the nutrition in more easily, but work out what's right for you. So practice taking on that nutrition on the bike with whatever conditions you're likely to be in. For the run, I would always say walk the hills anyway. So that's a good opportunity to get your nutrition in. Anya's question is heat, heat, heat. And again, we can go through this in more detail. Pop a Q&A through to the pop a question through to the Q&A if you want more specifics on heat. And Anya, we can talk about it in our coaching call anyway. But definitely train for it. If you're expecting it to be hot on race day, train for the heat. Even if it's not hot, the adaptations that you get are going to help you on race day. So it's kind of like it's like an altitude camp in terms of the change in your blood profile. It's making your blood stronger. I'm trying to think of a really simple way of saying it, but it's going to mean you have more blood plasma available, which means you've got more oxygen carrying capacity. So even if it's not hot, it's giving you an advantage on race day. So definitely train for it, as I say, either doing those turbo sessions, wearing everything you own, or doing more and more time in the sauna. Stacey asked what's best to do during the taper period. And I think from the question she's asked that she's talking about a marathon taper period here. So during that taper period, as I say, you want to reduce your volume. If you're following a plan, follow the plan. That should tell you. You want to make sure that you're cutting down your volume, but potentially keeping the intensity in there. You want to make sure you carry on fueling because you want to go into race day fueled. You'll often feel that you go into race day feeling really sluggish and lethargic because you're carrying on taking on all that glycogen into your body. Glycogen's stored with water, so you'll end up actually heavier. You might put on a little bit of weight in the run up to the race because of that water that you've carried with you, but you're going to be burning through that glycogen as you go. You want to have those glycogen reserves topped up as high as possible. So make sure you're still eating, make sure you're reducing your training. Do things like foam rolling, stretching, get a massage, anything that's going to mean that your muscles and everything feel better going into race day. Carry on. I would definitely drop down your strength and conditioning in the weeks up to the race. Either, well, I would just kind of maintain, definitely not looking for progression. And race week, I wouldn't be doing anything heavy at all. I'd just be doing some foam rolling, maybe some sort of band walks and stuff, some stability, mobility, and foam rolling and stretching. In terms of what recovery looks like after the race, again, it depends what race you're doing. But after a marathon, I would say I would definitely have the week after as a proper rest week. You want to do some recovery sessions like an easy swim or a very easy zone 1 bike ride. That's going to help to flush through. So it's going to help you recover faster, but it's recovery. It's not training. Definitely nothing hard in the week after. Then start picking it up a little bit from the week after that, obviously depending on what your goals are. If you haven't got another goal in the calendar, I would still suggest having some training in the diary. Otherwise, it's very easy just to go, oh, I'll start again next week. I'll start again next week. So have something in the diary, but really, really easy. It will take a month or up to 2 months to actually recover from that marathon. You might feel fine, but your body is still recovering. So still be taking it easy in what you're doing for that month or so after the race. And then for both, what's the associated impacts on other disciplines, swimming and cycling? So do you need to reduce? So for the taper, yes, you want to go into that race day fresh. So the running has the most impact on your body. So that's certainly the one you want to be most focused on. But yeah, there's no point in doing a really hard bike session the day before because you're still going to be tired and trying to recover from that. So taper in the cycling, taper in the swimming to some extent, but it's not likely to have such a load on your body. And then for that recovery afterwards, as I say, the swimming and cycling can be a really nice way of just doing a nice recovery session afterwards because they haven't got so much load on your legs, but you're flushing through the body. But yes, going easy in your training for the week or so after that. Emily, did you have any questions?
Nope.
Nope. Cool.
Nope, good. Thank you.
All right. I will leave it there then. So anything that I've raised an issue on that I haven't quite answered for you, pop it through to the Q&A or book in a coaching call and we can go through it there. Best of luck with your racing, everybody. I look forward to hearing how you all get on.
Thank you.